In today's video, we're going to be answering the question, is red meat bad for human health? Or to phrase the question slightly differently, are all of these modern diseases that seemingly appeared out of nowhere caused by the one food that humans have always eaten? On the agenda today, we're going to be looking at common myths regarding red meat. This video is going to be different to most other videos on this topic because I'm just going to look at the prevalence of these diseases over time and how it lines up with our consumption of red meat. And I'm going to show you how none of these diseases even existed until recently. So how could the one food we've always eaten be the cause of them? After that, I'm going to present the case as to why I think that there is something else that might be behind these diseases. And I'm going to break down a concept known as healthy user bias and how it's ruined the credibility of most of the science we have regarding nutrition. So, allegedly, red meat causes every disease under the sun. You name it, red meat's gotten the blame. Some people even blame diabetes on red meat. You often hear arguments like the saturated fat clogs our arteries and we have heart attacks as a result, or that the meat just rots away in our digestive systems and it causes colorectal cancer and all of those other sorts of things. So, the first chart I want to present to you, which we're going to look at together, is a timeline of heart disease and heart attack incidences in the United States. Now, I need to give full credit to Dr. Chris Knobbe. He did a great speech on this on the YouTube channel Low Carb Down Under, which I highly recommend you guys check out. But he seems like a great guy, so I'm sure he won't mind me presenting his data to more people. So let's have a look at this together. In the entire 19th century, so from the year 1800 to the year 1900, there were 8 worldwide reports of heart attacks. Yep, that's right. For an entire century, 8 people had heart attacks. And for those of you who say, well, we didn't have records of everyone that died from heart attacks, that's simply not the case. We have records of so many things going back a very long time. And with heart attacks, people just drop dead. If this was something that was happening, believe me, the medical professionals, they would have taken note of this. Then, in the year 1912, there's the first ever recorded heart attack in the United States. So, before the year 1912, not a single incident of a heart attack. And keep in mind, what did everyone eat then? Everyone ate a lot of red meat, a lot of eggs, a lot of people's calories was coming from the saturated animal fats. Then by the 1930s, heart disease becomes the leading cause of death. A disease that did not exist 20 years ago is now the leading cause of death in the United States. And then in 2010, 32% of deaths in the United States were from heart disease. So in the span of 100 years, we've gone from 0 heart disease to 1/3 of Americans dying from it. Okay, now let's look at the cancer rates. So in the year 1811, 1 in 188 deaths were due to cancer. Then by the year 1900, it had increased significantly up to 1 in 17. Now obviously that's still not ideal, that's still a rather high cancer rate, but people were still eating things like plants, which we know are offended and stuff. But where it gets worse is it goes from 1 in 17 people in the year 1900 to 1 in 3 people dying of cancer in 2010. That is a monumental increase. Then we look at Alzheimer's. Again, it just suddenly appeared in 1908. Then by 1948, it still wasn't that prevalent, only 150 people had it. Now, in 2023, 55 million people have Alzheimer's. So just by looking at these statistics right here, we can see that these are modern diseases. Originally, these things were called Western diseases because they were only in Western countries which ate this hyper-processed food. However, now they're known as modern diseases because all the countries eat the same food as us. So all of these diseases spawn in from nowhere. What could we blame? Maybe we could blame the one food that we've always eaten. That would be rather convenient for the food companies. But what does the data tell us? So 99% of our fats are coming from animal fats. Then as soon as the 20th century starts, we introduce something known as vegetable oil. And we start having more and more of this stuff. It's incredibly cheap to make. And as we see, the amount of it we have just increases monumentally. Now in the year 1980, it's when the first dietary guidelines came in that we should all reduce our fats. So that's what happened. Everyone started reducing their animal fats, but we continued to eat more and more of this vegetable oil. So as we see, the chart just goes up and up. Now, if we remember correctly, the first case of Alzheimer's was in 1908, and the first heart attack recorded in the United States was in 1912, which very coincidentally is when we started having this vegetable oil. Remember, before vegetable oil, 0 of the stuff. And then all of a sudden our vegetable oil consumption goes like this, but it must be the one food we've always eaten, according to all these health experts. Now red meat intake in the United States peaked in the 1970s, and since then the average American eats 44% less than they used to. However, as we've seen from all this data, the prevalence of all these diseases has continued to go up. To a lot of people, this data is going to seem incredibly confusing. They've been told their entire lives that red meat's bad. They see headlines about it all the time. How is it that we find in many studies that red meat's bad? Well, now I want to explain a concept to you known as healthy user bias. So how this works is they get 2 groups of people. They'll get a high vegetable group, a group of people that eats lots of vegetables. And they'll get another group of people, the low vegetable intake group. Now this low vegetable group, have a guess what they're eating. They're eating the gas station pies, they're eating the burgers on their way home from work, they're eating all of this ultra processed garbage. All of these foods which are made from chemicals with hundreds of ingredients, some of them. Now even though I don't think eating plants are good for us, only an absolute idiot would argue that eating some friggin' broccoli and spinach is going to be anywhere near as bad for you as eating this ultra processed stuff with 100 different plants combined, many of which are put through these ultra processing processes where they heat the foods up to super high temperatures, extract some little oil, then they mix it with some chemical solvent. All of this stuff, like I said, it's basically chemicals. And so then what they'll do is they'll compare the health outcomes between the high vegetable group and the low vegetable group. And you have a guess what they find. The high vegetable group does better than the low vegetable group. Wow, who would have thought that people eating foods with only one ingredient would be better for them than eating chemicals? This right here is called an observational study. So that's how they show that vegetables are good for you. But how do they prove that red meat is bad? Wow, it's basically the exact same thing. What they do is they get a group of vegans and a group of meat eaters, and then they compare health outcomes. Now, 30 to 60% of people go vegan due to health reasons. So these people are much less likely to smoke, they're much less likely to drink alcohol, and they're also much more likely to get enough sleep, avoid the ultra-processed garbage, and to do enough exercise. So they compare these vegans with the meat-eating group. But this meat-eating group, they're not strict carnivores. They include literally everything as meat. You had lasagna the other day? That's one serving of meat. You had a burger on your way home from some fast food joint? That's one serving of meat. You had a gas station pie? That's a serving of meat. And on screen right now, you can see the ingredients that are in some of these foods. Seriously, I just googled gas station pie from a local gas station that's near me. Those are the ingredients. I searched up cheeseburger. I went on some big fast food company's website, and those were the ingredients. Now these meat eaters, they're also seen as rebellious people. These people have been told for years that meat's bad for them, but they don't care. They're still eating it. So these people are also much more likely to smoke, much more likely to drink. Chances are they're not exercising, not getting enough sunlight, not getting enough sleep, these sorts of things. And so then again, they compare the two groups, the meat-eating group with the vegan group, and then have a guess what they find. The group of people eating foods with only one ingredient are healthier than the group of people eating all these ultra-processed chemicals. But then obviously, they're not going to blame the chemicals. They're going to blame the one food that humans have always eaten. That's what gets the blame for it. It's a great psyop, and the majority of people fall for it. I often get people commenting on my videos talking about how I'm giving people heart disease simply because I say to people, eat more red meat. Now from these studies, you can print any headline you want in theory, because you know the meat eating and chemical group, you just take the chemical part out, obviously that's what they do, has worse health outcomes than the vegan group. So from here, whatever you like. So you'll see some headline. The more fiber you have, the healthier you'll be. When in reality, it's the more fiber you're having, the less of this ultra-processed garbage you're having. Every single negative headline you've ever seen has come from one of these observational studies. Now there's another type of study called an interventional study. Now what they do here is they get a group of people and they completely change something up about their lifestyle. Now what happens when you do this to people? I want to show you guys the Harvard study. Now admittedly there's a number of issues with this study. It's not perfect science. For one, there's self-selection bias. However, it's basically the only carnivore interventional study we have. And as you can see on screen right now, the results from the study are remarkable. And from memory, I think there was like over 2,000 people in the study, so it wasn't like it was a very small sample size either. Now, what about fiber? Don't we need it? Isn't it essential for human health? Well, let's have a look at the study together, in which they got 63 people with constipation and put them on 3 different types of diets. 41 patients were put on a no fiber diet, 16 on a reduced fiber diet, and 6 resumed their high fiber diet. Now, patients who stopped or reduced dietary fiber had significant improvement in their symptoms, while those who continued on a high fiber diet had no change. And the study concluded, constipation and its associated symptoms can be effectively reduced by stopping or even lowering the intake of dietary fiber. Who would have thought a species that's only eaten meat for at least hundreds of thousands of years can do alright when they don't eat plants? But this sounds insane. How is it that your local doctor doesn't know this? Well, the thing is that doctors aren't taught a lot about nutrition at medical school. They're just taught the basics like, you need lots of fiber, because every study we see where there's a high fiber group and a low fiber group, the high fiber group does better. And that red meat's bad for the exact same reasons. As we now know, this is due to healthy user bias, but they're not told this. In fact, I was watching a great video the other day from Paul Saladino, when he went to a university and interviewed these med students and asked them, how many interventional studies are there that show red meat being bad? Remember, interventional is the type of study where they completely change their diet and see the effects it has on them. And these students were convinced that there would be at least some. Paul even offered to give them $100 if they could find a single one, and nobody could. So in conclusion, there is zero actual evidence that red meat's bad for us. Every single study that's ever been presented that shows red meat being harmful for us is only an observational study which suffers from healthy user bias. There's only been one interventional study where they've put people on an all-meat diet, and the results from that study showed that when people ate a diet of only meat, their health transformed in a very positive way. Now, there are many doctors who have seen the truth and they're talking about it, and I highly recommend that you check out guys like Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Ken Berry, but chances are if you're watching this video, you've already seen a lot of their content. And once again, I want to give another shout out to Dr. Chris Knobbe, who gave an incredible talk on low carb down under, which like I said earlier, I highly recommend you guys check that out. It's a great talk. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of my content, consider subscribing down below. It's completely free and it means you'll see more videos like this. On screen right now are some videos of mine that YouTube thinks you'll like. So if those seem interesting to you, feel free to check them out. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.